Hey, welcome back to another week of the IOGA Podcast. All that Idaho outfitter and guide information that you just can't wait another day for. I'm Erik Weiseth, the Executive Director of IOGA. And yeah, I'm going to edit the shit out of this one. I can see it already.
Yeah, thank God it's not a live stream. That Idaho podcast gives you all the infos, kids. Holy shit. This is why I don't podcast, actually. I just remembered.
This might take a while.
I'm leaving all this in, just so we're clear.
I hope you do. I think this is good. I think that was a solid open.
Hey, I'm Jack Hurty, the Policy Director of IOGA. And today we have a special guest, Lieberman, Director of America Outdoors.
Hey, folks.
And formerly Executive Director of IOGA until he abandoned us to go play in Washington, D.C.
Yes, sir.
So awesome. Well, Aaron, thanks for joining us from wherever you are. You're still in Idaho, right? I get this question a lot. So if you could actually just answer it for people, that would be great. Where are you these days?
Yeah, I'm still Idaho based. So spent a good portion of the year up in Stanley. Otherwise, right now outside wild and scenic Star, Idaho, despite the backdrop. And it's me visioning. You got to manifest where you want to be. But then otherwise travel around the country, meet with folks. So still Idaho based.
Well, thanks for joining us, Aaron. Aaron has continued to basically sort of support IOGA, oftentimes from behind the scenes. We're on the phone a lot. It seems like every week talking about both me getting updates nationally from kind of what's going on at the America Outdoors level, and then Aaron just also giving his 2 cents and advice on some of the Idaho issues and things that he has context on and everything else. And so as we go through the issues, there's the national stuff that Aaron's going to be a real add-on in this podcast, but then there's some of the Idaho issues. He'll also probably be able to weigh in and give us some historical context. So first and foremost, the upcoming thing here is IOGA's Thaw is coming up next week on the 26th. That's our annual fundraising gala in Boise at Jump. We have live auction on trips. We have silent auction with all sorts of really cool gear, outdoor gear, stuff from some Idaho artists to guides, and all sorts of other things. We have the rifle raffle, which is like one of my favorite things.
Rifle raffle.
When I started coming to the Thaw, like that was the main reason I came back, is like I wanted to win a gun. I've never been to a raffle.
I gotta ask you a quick question. One executive director to another. Is it above board to keep the rifle if you buy raffle tickets and win?
If I win that rifle, I'm keeping that rifle 100%.
That's what I did.
Yeah.
I also rigged the game. Edit that out, Jack.
I don't.
I played fair.
Just bought all the cards. I bought 52 cards.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the rifle raffle is just like one of the great things. Like one of my very early IOGA memories was going to the Thaw and seeing somebody's kids walking around, like one of them holding the gun and one of them selling cards. They were like 8. I was like, yes, these are my people and this is my place. I'm into this.
Well, and there are people who will drive from like 2 states away and you ask them like, oh man, I didn't know you were coming all the way up here. It's like rifle raffle, man. I'm here for the rifle. Like people go just for that. But it's sweet. I'm going to be there.
Yeah. Aaron's coming. So you can say hi to Aaron.
Yeah.
I'll be there too. You can say hi to me.
So we still have some tickets left. 26th at Jump. Go to the IOGA website. You can find all the information there. But if you don't have a ticket, it's definitely time to buy one because it's going to be a good time. We've got a great band coming. The Merchants of Groove are coming.
That's a sweet name.
It's a super sweet name, and they're really fun. They play at one of the fundraisers for Little Ski Hill up in McCall, and that's where we came across them, and they're a good time. So that'll be a lot of fun. Aaron, any outside of rifle raffle, all the years that you ran the Thaw, what's like one of your favorite memories or one of those moments that just like really sticks out with you?
Honestly, it's always like the hiccups. Like the whole thing runs so smoothly because we have, there's always an extraordinary amount of planning, which you're in the midst of right now. But, like figuring out that we didn't have enough bartenders. So being back there with some other guides, like pouring beers, the dancing, like I've always been a big fan of the cowboy dancing that happens. And by cowboy dancing, I mean like swing dancing. I don't think I ever saw any line dancing. The live music. Like thinking that I'm going to be able to win some of the silent auction items and never winning the silent auction items. Highlight, lowlight, kind of at the same time. Honestly, just the people though. Like it's like all of my favorite types of people all in one place, getting stoked about stuff that I also am stoked about, which is cool. So I'm going to be there. I'd highly recommend people go. It's super fun.
It's super fun. I've always, it's one of my favorite events. It's like,
and Erik was just down at the
it's all great
Capitol,
people.
which is why he's wearing the clip-on tie because he was down at the Capitol. That's not actually how you have to dress.
This is a real tie. Thank you very much.
It is. It's
yeah. My wife asked the other day because she's never been to the Thaw, and she asked like she's going to go this year, and she's like, "Well, what do I have to wear?" I was like, "Outfitter formal." So like jean shorts and t-shirt totally qualify. Yeah. But you can also, like.
That's actually, in hindsight, that's actually my favorite part is like you'll get some folks showing up in like actual like evening gowns or like, like sussed up suits. And then you'll just get like cowboy formal. And then you'll get just like river people in Patagonia, like puffies, It's like a real microcosm of outdoor Idaho.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jack, you want to tell us about the Hell's Canyon complex and what's going on there?
Yeah. So we've started to talk about this a lot more, but if you haven't heard, FERC finally issued the supplemental draft environmental impact statement for the Hell's Canyon complex. This is, potentially the last analysis of a multi-staged, multi-decade analysis going back to the late 90s, I believe, and relicensing the Hell's Canyon complex. There's a lot to go over there. Just like one document is like thousands of pages, but the most important thing for outfitters right now is that FERC is probably going to license that project for the next 50 years with a minimum flow of 6,500 CFS. So that's lower than the 8,500 CFS that we had been asking for, that Northwest Power Boaters and Power Vessels Association have been asking for, and the Army Corps of Engineers has repeatedly said is kind of the minimum for safety in that canyon, especially for larger jet boats going upriver and coming back down through some of the bigger rapids.
Well, I mean, it's not just Army Corps of Engineers, like every agency, including Forest Service supporting their statement that has looked at this, have all said that 6,500 is the minimum safe flow, right? And it's also U.S. Coast Guard, I think, right? Like U.S. Army Corps, Forest Service, Coast Guard. There's at least 3 separate entities who have all looked at minimum safe navigability for power boats and said
exactly
8,500.
Yeah. And FERC basically said, they said this back in 2007, and then they said it again this year, that they understand the concerns with safety, but it's not worth the lost power and revenue generation for Idaho Power. So it's unfortunate to see, that kind of be dismissed with a hand wave like that.
Well, especially because, correct me if I'm wrong, Jack, but I'm not, that there's no actual loss in power generation. There's no actual loss in, like, it wouldn't be sending down more water. It's just changing what time of day you're sending down what amount of water, right? And power generation loss is definitely all relative. We're talking about a bunch of electrons floating around and being sent to different parts of the grid at different times. But it's really about the revenue delta, right? Like how much Idaho Power, how much additive net revenue Idaho Power can make, which in fairness, they should. But like, am I wrong there? That's still the case, right?
Well, I think, part of it is it's not necessarily that they're losing on power generation, but they're losing out on power generation during the time of day when they say they need it the most. And that's where the revenue comes in, is they can get the best price for it at night, because during the day there's a surplus of electricity. And so there's probably some legitimate concerns around kind of grid reliability and stability. And as I've learned, the grid can be a fragile thing. Yeah, I think ultimately Idaho Power's thrown its weight around on this, not because they're worried about the grid, but because they're worried about their bottom lines. And yeah, to the point of, the water supply, this is something we talked about at the State House, and actually the governor asked about this in particular, but it wouldn't mean having the 8,500 minimum doesn't mean sending more water downstream. It's not interfering with anyone's water rights. It's not dealing with flow augmentation or anything like that. It's simply a matter of when that water goes downstream instead of how much. So yeah, we'll try to reinforce this point over the next couple of weeks until March 2nd when the comment period closes. But, 50,000 people that use that resource every year. And to make a decision like that and to really offer very little in terms of navigational safety is disappointing. Basically, their plan is that Idaho Power will do some text messaging. You'll be able to get a text from Idaho Power on what the stream flows are or what the river flows are. They're going to put in some stream gauges downstream to kind of get a better sense of what the water level is at. They want to do some kind of safety education for drivers and other recreational users. And then they would like Idaho Power to look into the possibility of pulse flows where they might bump flows during the day to get more water downstream in the rapids. I think all of those, it's good that they're thinking about these. They're better than nothing, but they really are insufficient compared to that 8,500 minimum. And the pulse flows in particular, I think sounds like could be a useful tool, and there may be times and places that it's beneficial, but overall it's going to be really hard. The benefits of a pulse flow really spread out as that water moves downstream, and it's difficult to time when you're bumping that water up for the rapids because, you bump it up at one point, then Wild Sheep gets more water, Granite gets that water at a different time, and other rapids downstream are getting that water even later. So, yeah, whether or not that's really going to help with safety, I'm not sure. And it really is a safety question. Yeah, it's discretionary. I mean, asking Idaho Power to do this thing that they don't really want to do, they're probably going to say that it's not worth it.
Yeah, without any hard and fast requirements, we pinky promise that we will consider the possibility of certain accommodations in future should we choose to do so.
Yep.
Yeah.
Couple things just to give them credit on some things we do like. They are proposing a sandbar supplementation plan, which could actually be really helpful for kind of building back up some of those beaches down there. It is a tiny fraction of what's been lost in the last 50 years, but it's better than nothing. They're also doing some stuff to improve dissolved oxygen in the water. So that should help out the fishery. And I know there's some people pushing to get some other water quality things, to make eating Hell's Canyon fish safer, which could be a big benefit for a lot of people. If you're spending a lot of time down there eating bass, you probably shouldn't.
I wish that were the language in the language itself to make eating Hell's Canyon fish safer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Today's Tuesday, I think anyway, probably tomorrow. So Wednesday, you should get, if you get the IOGA newsletter, you will have links and a bunch of more information in that newsletter about this issue, along with tools to help you submit comments. So the more public comments, the better. So if you're an outfitter or guide who operate in Hell's Canyon or you care about this, we'll give you the tools to help get those comments submitted. So if you don't get our newsletter, go to the website, sign up for the newsletter. But if you do by tomorrow, Wednesday, you should get it in your email box.
Yep. And we're asking folks to submit a comment using those templates by March 2nd. And if you're interested and willing, to forward comments on to your guests, especially if you're a Hell's Canyon outfitter and you have guests that are going on your trips with you down there, and get them to comment as well.
So it's not likely that we get this changed, but it's not technically impossible either. So comments are great. The more comments, the better. Awesome. Well, another thing that came up this week is we heard from one of our members as they were doing a bunch of their permit renewals, both on the Forest Service and the BLM side, that the 10-year permit that they were looking to sign had language telling them that they needed to adhere to Executive Order 14026, which was the executive order from the Biden administration creating a $15 minimum wage for federal contractors. Now, that executive order is no longer in effect. It was taken out by the Trump administration under executive order. Aaron, do you remember the executive order on the Trump administration?
I can name you all the executive orders of the things we don't like.
Yeah.
13658, 14026. The ones that we do like, I don't really care about that much.
So
yeah.
If you care about that number, it's in the newsletter that you'll get tomorrow. I put it in there. The Trump administration one that rescinds EO 14026. But there's kind of a longer story here that as we got into looking into this, I contacted Aaron to talk about it and see if he'd seen this anywhere else. And I think uncovered a whole bunch of things. But Aaron, why don't you just start with your conversation with the BLM about this specific issue and what's happening over there?
Yeah, actually, let me go back first. You already warned people. This is the 2-hour pod. We're doing a 2-hour pod. So turn on, get your long drive going, stop off at the coffee shop. No, but I do think for just a reminder for folks, 13658, Executive Order 13658 was the executive order that President Obama issued in his second term that initially established a minimum federal or a minimum wage for it wasn't framed at that point as federal contractors, and it wasn't sort of targeted specifically at recreation service providers, outfitters, and guides, or anything like that. In Trump 1, Trump directed in a superseding executive order, Trump directed the germane agencies, in this case, parks, BLM, Forest Service, et cetera, so any federal land management agency, to remove language from contracts or authorizations of contracts or permits that included or referenced that executive order 13658. It didn't rescind it, which is relevant for the next stage, but it did say like, hey, go into those permits, find that language, pull that language out, and put that language somewhere far away. To date, no agency has fully done that. The Park Service looked at it and in short was like, that feels like a lot. We'll just put something on the website to start and say like, hey guys, this isn't valid anymore, but it's still in your contracts. And then President Biden issued Executive Order 14026.
14026, yeah.
14026. And in that executive order, establishing a minimum wage for federal contractors, recreation service providers, these permittees were sort of specifically called out and identified, especially in the associated or in the language that explained this executive order beyond the executive order itself. That started the threshold at a $15 minimum wage, but it was also staggered to increase year over year. And so technically it'd be at 1775, something like that now, as a minimum wage for federal contractors. That also changed the definition in Department of Labor regulations for outfitters and guides who, like, if you're an outfitter and guide listening to this, which if you're not, I don't know why you're listening to this, but welcome. But for outfitters and guides, if you like look in your permit, it says like, this is not a contract and you are not a contractor. Despite that, the Executive Order 14026 said like, psych, you are a contractor now and your minimum wage is this much and it's going to go up. Trump 2 comes in and I kind of learned from the mistake on the previous on 13658. So Trump 2 comes in and in response to Executive Order 14026, that's the Biden one, says rescinds the Biden executive order itself. But that executive order was already in effect with regulation developed by the Department of Labor to enforce and to enact and enforce that executive order. And so now the Department of Labor and other affected or relevant agencies have been directed to not enforce any of the provisions of 14026 as it's been rescinded, and are supposed to be removing any language from revising regulation to remove language that would enforce Executive Order 14026. They haven't finished that yet. Once they do, it'll theoretically be, not theoretically, it'll, barring any unforeseens, go into a final rule and it'll be fully rescinded. That's the background in full. That was a whole journey, and I actually forgot what I was supposed to. Oh, BLM. So for those who are keeping up, Erik asked, hey, Aaron, why don't you tell us about the BLM thing? That was the background. So when Erik reached out on this, like the permit in question was a BLM permit, and it was issued, within the last month or something, and was sent over to the outfitter for signature within the last month or something through the Raptor system. So through the online permitting and use reporting, the et cetera system that BLM is using and trying to roll out more broadly. That language, the permit language in this case, still included reference to, it was Executive Order 14026, wasn't it, Erik?
140.
Yeah, it wasn't 13658. Yeah, so it still included sort of a stipulation in the permit, a permit term requiring the outfitter to abide by the requirements of Executive Order 14026. Reached out to the BLM on this, obviously, to ask, one, hey, what's up? Like, why is this still going out? It would make more sense if this were in permits from a while back. I think the long and short for folks,
or if they were asking you to sign like a paper permit that was printed, like,
right. Yeah, like hey, here's the template. I scanned it. I scanned it.
Yeah.
I scanned it, used OCR, because it's the 90s anyway. Yeah, but no, if it were paper or if it should have been updated already. In fairness, BLM's, trying to roll out the biggest single piece of permitting related legislation probably ever. So they're a little bit busy. But the gist is, BLM recognizes that language shouldn't be in there. And they are hoping to, the way the Raptor works, they have these monthly updates, and they're hoping that in the next Raptor update, they'll be able to, so in theory next month, they'll be able to update these sort of standard template permit language that includes those standard boilerplate terms and conditions that are in those permits to remove reference of that executive order. In theory, it shouldn't matter in this moment if it is in your permit, because your permit also says that, this is subject to all applicable federal and state laws. But in practice, as an outfitter, like, I would be pretty uncomfortable. And I think as outfitters, if, this is you should be pretty uncomfortable signing something that references a rescinded executive order that stands to significantly impact your business, especially since we've seen so much flip-flop between the executive orders over time. Was that the answer to your question?
Yes. Yeah, it was.
And more,
So,
Aaron,
I mean,
that's
I
your
think
response.
No, yeah, you did great, Aaron. Well done.
Thank you.
And I think the takeaways here are, if this is like, if you have a sign permit that has this in there, you probably shouldn't lose sleep over it because it's not being enforced. If you're in the renewal process and there's references to 14026 in there, I would recommend talking to your permit administrator, possibly your attorney, and just have that conversation and see if you can get it pulled out, because it shouldn't be in there. It's, referencing something that is not in effect. But at the same time, if you are in a situation where you have to sign the thing and it is what it is, it's probably not worth losing sleep over. But it's best if you can get it out of there, I would. Does that sound about right?
I would agree with the latter. I would agree with the latter statement. If you can get it out of there, I would. I mean, everybody's going to have to make their own decision on whether or not it makes more sense to sign a permit when, like, you're holding up your permit administrator from being able to do the next thing. I'm not honestly sure how that would hold up a permit administrator. I mean, historically speaking, these permits have been renewed on an annual basis because they couldn't keep up for decades at a time. I would definitely, if you're concerned, I would consult an attorney. If it were me, not legal advice, I would definitely request that be removed. Both any reference to Executive Order 14026, the Biden Executive Order in particular, or Executive Order 13658. Because the thing about Executive Order 13658 is we won't know this for sure. Again, I'm not an attorney, and we won't know this for sure until and unless challenged and ruled on. But the Trump 1 executive order that acted on the Obama Executive Order 13658 only directed the agencies to remove that language from the permits for recreation service providers. So in theory, to the extent that language is still in your permit, it could still be applicable. And it wasn't supposed to be in permits reissued since, I can't remember the exact day, but it shouldn't be in newly issued permits anyway. If it is, you should definitely ask it to be removed, because there is an active ongoing executive order that requires the agency to do so. And if 14026 is in your permit, I mean, again, make your own call, talk to your attorney, but I would strongly encourage you to reach out to the agency and let IOGA know, let AO know, depending where you're at, but reach out to the agency and tell them, hey, this isn't supposed to be in here, just in case you didn't know. Is there a way that I could please have a new permit that doesn't have this in it?
Yeah. And I think I would just add to that, to Aaron's point about let America Outdoors know, let IOGA know. We were able to go have this conversation with the BLM and to get this taken out of permits because we had an outfitter member who brought this to our attention. So it's, we can't see and know it all. And so it takes outfitter members letting us know where, hey, it was basically a phone call of, hey, I've seen this in my permit and I think this might be an issue, but I don't really know. And that allowed between Aaron and I to kind of go down the rabbit hole here, especially Aaron, and get into it and try and solve some problems and bring it to everybody else's attention that it's something to look out for. So thanks to that outfitter for paying attention to their business and the
also thanks to
documents
the
that they're signing.
BLM.
Yeah.
Because the BLM, I mean, from the top down, they were Johnny on the spot. I'm not even sure if that's a phrase, by the way. But they were, let's just go with it. Let's say it's a phrase. Jack, could you fact check this for me? Edit this out. They were Johnny on the spot, responding back in real time, responding back minute by minute with updates and sharing immediately with the folks over in their permitting division or wherever it is within Raptor to see if they can get a fix in as soon as possible. So they're juggling a lot right now. And hopefully, I'm guessing we'll get into some other stuff around permitting and explore maybe, but hopefully the Forest Service going forward will not have reference to either Executive Order 13658 or Executive Order 140626 in permits issued after this spring.
We were out sort of celebrating the success of Lobby Day, and I had some sort of expression like your Johnny on the spot one that I said to, and like everybody around me just like stopped. They're like, what does that, what does that even mean? I was like, you haven't heard that expression? I've heard that my entire life. They're like, yeah, no, that's not a thing. I'm trying to remember what
So
it
I think as
was.
people say.
Some
Yeah.
sort of edism, I'm sure.
Yeah.
My dad
For those
had all sorts of
listening,
funny-
an edism
Yeah.
refers to Eric's old man, Pop Ed, who is full of phrases that are generally politically incorrect, but also wonderful.
And rarely makes sense. But, you know, at the
Very
same time,
rarely,
you
yeah.
kind of know what he's trying to say. It's very strange. Anyway, awesome. Well, yeah, we will, as we get down through here, we'll have some more explore updates and those kinds of things. But for now, Jack and I were at the Capitol today for a hearing in House State Affairs on House Joint Memorial 009, which was a constitutional amendment or proposed constitutional amendment from Representative Raybould and Petsky, dealing with Idaho Department of Lands and the directive that the land board has as they think about the value of lands and whether they should sell them and everything else. So a couple things that happened here in the very recent, or very, I guess, almost immediately and today was HJM 009 has been put in the drawer and changed, the language in there changed. And so a lot of our members at Lobby Day, we actually met with Representative Raybould, and she kind of went through the two parts of her amendment. The first part being changes to the directive for the land board as they think about the value of land. So right now it talks about maximum return for the beneficiaries, changing some of that language to highlight revenue driving activities, but also the value of public access and fishing and hunting and a bunch of other things. In the upcoming newsletter, we'll have a link to the actual language. And then there was a second part that dealt with what would happen in the unlikely case that significant amounts of federal land were given to the state of Idaho. And right now, that land would most likely go into IDL, where it would be thought of as endowment lands and treated with the same directive as the rest of endowment lands. And Representative Raybould was trying to create a separate bucket where that land would be viewed differently, treated differently, and the financial returns off that land wouldn't go to the beneficiaries of IDL currently, but rather go to actually maintain the land that was provided. After consultation with lots of different groups, that second piece was actually taken out, basically today. So they reintroduced a new version of the bill that was RS today. It will likely have a hearing in House State Affairs maybe next week. Overall, here at IOGA, we think that this is a positive because it accounts for the value of the businesses who operate on IDL land. So if you're a hunt outfitter who's operating on IDL land, as of today, and as evidenced by what happened out east this summer, that land can be sold out from under you tomorrow without them even telling you, in kind of the way the system currently operates. And the only thing that they're looking at as far as the value of your business is the value of the lease that you're paying. This amendment would allow them to look more holistically at the long-term value of your lease, what that brings to the community, how that serves Idahoans overall versus just that immediate financial return. So this is something that we believe is a positive for all of our outfitters operating on IDL land, that it provides more long-term stability and I guess the ability to think that your business will be there long-term. So if you operate on IDL land, we would love to hear from you about this. We'd love to hear if you're interested in testifying on what this could mean for your business. And like I said, we'll have a link to the updated language in the newsletter going out tomorrow. So kind of keep an eye out for that. But if you have questions, you can reach out. Jack, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I guess you nailed it, but I'll add one more thing about kind of the structure of how this is written. The current mandate for like Idaho Department state lands, they are mandated to manage those lands for the long-term financial benefit, which is I think what you said, Erik. So oftentimes what that looks like is it's actually better for them to sell the land, take the money, and invest it in the stock market. I think I was listening today, and they get about 80% of the returns from the endowment comes from the stock market, doesn't come out of the land that they own. So just put that out there, that there is a financial incentive to move capital from land into the stock market when it makes sense. The new way that this is written is they have to look at revenue generation first, which includes outfitters. The amendment specifically names mining, grazing, and logging, but it is also open to and inclusive of other revenue generating sources. So an outfitting permit would fit right into that. The second priority that the land board would have to consider is public access for recreation, and it specifically names people's ability to hunt, fish, and trap. And then the third priority that they can look at is to sell or exchange the land to generate revenue that way. So looking at this from the outfitting perspective, we are both first and second priorities, whereas I think as just to kind of restate what Erik was saying, in the current structure, we fit somewhat into the mandate, but in reality, we are often overlooked because a hunting lease or permit doesn't generate as much revenue as simply selling the land to a timber company or a real estate developer or something like that. I think this is a clear win for outfitters, and it'll be interesting to see how it moves forward.
I think another piece that it adds that I really hadn't thought about until today is an obligation for the public to have access to IDL lands, which
Yep.
isn't a thing today. IDL lands do get closed up to the public just because of the cost of management of those. And this actually creates an obligation for IDL lands to allow access to the public when it doesn't interfere with revenue generating activities. So logging, mining, etc. Yeah.
Is the change to the language, so in the adjusted bill that I think you just were down there where they were talking about sending the routing slip over for a print hearing, right? But was that language, you mentioned that that would include some changes to the structure of the IDL mandate, right? Did you say that part was removed?
No,
That's the part
that's
that's
the
still
core
there.
of the bill. Yeah.
Okay, so that part's still there.
Mhm.
But there's a hierarchy still to what that mandate is. First is maximal return for the beneficiaries. Is that right?
No, it's revenue
It's
generation.
okay. So revenue
Mhm.
generation, period, but inclusive of the named industries, and with outfitting being the unnamed but tacit addition.
Essentially, it's
Including but not limited to
yeah.
Uh,
logging, mining, grazing. So we don't get the official nod, but we are,
yeah, I was gonna say it might not be a reason to kill it, but it would be pretty cool if they could just add that phrase in. If
I'll
you're
mention it.
listening,
We'll
Representative
bring it up.
Raybould, just pop that in there real quick before it gets to print here.
I'm sure
Yeah,
she
and
is.
Thanks for all you. Thanks.
she's mentioned, they've talked about the possibility of kind of coming back next year if this passes on the ballot in November and doing some trailer legislation to kind of, you know, put in statute some of the concepts that, and clarify some of the language. And so I think that'd be a good opportunity for us is to try and get trailer legislation, establishing outfitting as a official revenue generator for state endowment lands.
Yeah.
But
Great. On to the next thing. So the one big beautiful bill, state tax conformity. So the state of Idaho has decided they're going to conform with all the tax rules there with the one big beautiful bill. And one of the things that came through that was no taxes on tips or overtime, which I guess sunsets in 2028. But Aaron, there are some limitations to that, if I understand it correctly. You want to let us know what some of those are?
Sure. That sounded like a weathercat. Over to you, Aaron. Yeah. So the qualified tip deduction, um, I think definitely could be beneficial for guides in particular, obviously. So folks that are listening know that a big part of guiding is the tips that you get. To the extent that you're reporting all those as a guide, you do stand to be able to benefit from a tip deduction. There's pretty clear classification. I don't have it in front of me, but I think in recreation instruction, maybe there's a pretty there's a pretty clear nexus, and Merrick Outdoors submitted comments asking for even further clarification to make a distinction between like tour guides. They reference like river guides, but don't necessarily reference other things that a lot of folks in Idaho do, like pack trips, hunt trips, stuff like that. But it seems pretty clear that the intent was to capture, like they say, river expedition guides. I think the language that's in the bill under one of their classification types. And so I think the intent was pretty clear to try to capture folks in our industry. That's good and great news. It could also cover like shuttle drivers potentially. I hadn't really thought through this until we were talking yesterday, Eric, but I think it could, because there's a role transportation and something. There's a classification for transportation associated professions, and there are criteria around like the threshold of what you may earn a year to still be eligible for this. But like for a guide, I think in the like say in the 12% federal tax bracket, like making $30,000 to $40,000 a year off of guiding, which would be either a really good big season, and I think that is 30,000 to 40,000 before reported tips. So this would be probably more of your like year round or 3-season guide in any given case. I think with like say $2,000, which is probably on the low end for that bracket, right? In reported tips, it would save you like $250 a year, something like that. So not insubstantial. The limits are that this is purely income. So it doesn't apply to payroll taxes or anything like that, which does limit its, I think, effectiveness or its overall benefit for guides that are looking at it. But, for like a high end hunting, fishing guides pulling in like 5,000, like to the extent those are being reported, the savings would be like $600. So it could be fairly substantial. The other sideboard, I think, to its applicability, which depends on a lot, future possibility are big places, but is sunsets in 2028. And so unless reauthorized or picked back up in any subsequent administration, this is kind of a solitary window of time to be able to take advantage of it. And it does only apply to those reported tips. So I'd say those are the primary sideboards. But remember, guys, as you're already doing, tip reporting is mandatory. So just, take the deduction off the 100% of your tips that you are reporting.
Yeah, you got to report those tips for sure.
Yeah, 100%.
And reporting tips can help you show more income for getting a mortgage or a loan of some kind. So there are benefits.
Yeah. Also, the other sort of outlier I think here is I believe that it does not include, so this deduction does not include instances where gratuity is mandatory. You know what I mean? So like, for example, there are certain industries, let alone businesses, and some outfitters for sure that I know that have like a mandatory tip amount that's built into the cost. This does not provide a deduction for those mandatory gratuities, which seems strange to me for what it's worth. Like if it's an optional mandatory gratuity, and how is that different from the optional not mandatory gratuity insofar as they're both being reported? Shouldn't the deduction apply to both? Maybe there's industries outside of ours where that matters more, but that's another sideboard. So if you're a guide and your outfitter does have a mandatory gratuity built in or baked into the cost for clients, that would be another limitation of its benefit for you.
Yeah. All right, Jack. Chinook season setting is out there and time for public comment. Any updates on that?
Yeah, so Fish and Game is doing their yearly kind of season setting for all the spring Chinook fisheries. They're holding meetings across the state. I think they have one tonight in Riggins, actually. And then they'll be in Lewiston on the 18th, Nampa on the 18th, and Osaka up north on the 19th. So if you're in one of those places and you want to go give comment on season setting for spring Chinook, it's a great place to talk to your local fish manager, talk to other fishermen, kind of see what's what. They're also accepting comment online. Pretty easy to find. It's just under Chinook salmon fishing, public input on 2026 spring summer Chinook fishing season options. And then they have a bunch of different surveys for the different fisheries. So there's a general spring Chinook angler survey, a Clearwater, North Fork Clearwater, Middle Fork Clearwater, Loxaw and South Fork, and then Hell's Canyon, Rapid River Run, and South Salmon fisheries. So they're just kind of looking for feedback from the people that are on the ground. It's a really good opportunity for outfitters and guides to kind of let the fishery managers know what they're seeing and maybe push for any changes that they might like to see with how those fisheries are managed. But yeah, and this is a yearly thing, so I expect most people are familiar with it, but just a reminder, get your feedback in if you haven't already.
Yep. And link to this will be in the newsletter that comes out tomorrow as well.
And you have until
Another quick
February 22nd.
Oh, that's right. Yep. Coming up. Quick update. The Stan Potts area is open for prospectus. This has been, I told Aaron, we told Aaron that this had just come out for prospectus, and he was like, didn't that happen like 2 years ago? And
well, yeah, because I mean, there were conversations about this going out for prospectus that were ongoing when I first started as ED of IOGA, which was in 2018. Like,
yeah, I remember when I first got on the licensing board, like this was like, we were right on the edge of this being done. But all to say, we're here now.
So take that, everybody who says that government is inefficient. Look at that speed. Lickety split. They had that prospectus right out 9 years later.
Yep. But we're here.
Anyway, good job, guys.
Information, if you want to get your name in the hat on that one, will be in the newsletter that comes out tomorrow as well. Jack, Not in Wilderness Coalition has some events coming up. You want to give people an update?
Yeah, they'll be in the Non-Wilderness Coalition, as most of you are probably familiar with by now, is looking at the impacts of technology on wilderness. They'll be holding some kind of town hall, pint night style events in Riggins and McCall this weekend. So Thursday night, 18th, they'll be down in Riggins. I think they're at Little River Bait and Tackle. So come hang out with Carrie and Roy and all the Riggins folks. And then Friday night, they'll be in McCall. I think Eric's going to be there.
At the library, I think.
The library, that's right. No drinks, no alcohol at the library. So bummer, but should be a good time. I know they've been doing these events all across the state. I got to go. Well, Aaron and I have kind of been involved a little bit in the background, and then got to go to the event with Erik in Boise, and it's a really interesting conversation. I think it's a conversation that needs to happen right now before technology becomes so advanced that we can't really deal with it at all. And it's definitely relevant to outfitters across the state, whether or not you operate in the wilderness or just recreate in the wilderness. It's something we all need to be paying attention to. So yeah, show up Thursday in Riggins, Friday in McCall.
Zettel is driving this conversation everywhere. If you listen to last week's pod, you got the interview with Steve here. And then he was also on the Ranch podcast this last week, which I haven't listened to yet, but I'm sure it's it's probably a wild ride. So I'm hoping to listen to it here in the near future.
It's not as wild as you'd expect. He did a good job staying on message.
Bummer. I was really... When I told Matt that I had an interview for him, I was like, this is the guy that you're going to agree with whatever he says, but you're also going to think he should have said it out loud sometimes. So love Steve.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, great. So you get a chance to go see those if you're in McCall or Riggins. Let's see here. We got to sit in and listen to the introduction of House Bill 652 the other day, making hunting the state sport of Idaho. So one of the representatives came and was introducing this bill, and the story that he told was that some, I believe he said, middle school girl in his district was doing some project and discovered that Idaho does not have a state sport. And she came to him and said she believed that we should have a state sport and that because we're Idaho, it should be hunting. So a bill was introduced to make hunting the official sport of Idaho. One of the questions that came up is hunting a sport? Like, is there a winner and a loser? I mean, kind of, right? Like, I guess.
Well, also, I think that to the extent, which I'm not sure that sport is defined by there being winners and losers, right? But let's just work with that. To the extent that sport or sportsing or whatever it would be is defined by there being winners and losers, do both or all participants have to know that they're playing also? Because, the ungulate doesn't know it's playing. That's the whole thing. It doesn't know that this is a sport, if that's what's happening. Feels pretty real to it. Yeah, for what it's worth, as somebody who hunts, I also question, is this a sport? I think I like it more when it's not defined as a sport because it's more interesting that way.
They do call them sportsmen, though.
I mean, it's literally the name of the person that does the thing, a sportsman. So
right,
it does feel like that kind of lines up.
What do you think the odds are it passes?
it's hard to imagine the legislator that's going to come out and say they're against hunting
This is the hill
being the
I die
official
on.
sport of Idaho. Yeah, that feels like that's probably a
Well,
thing
once
that's-
Aaron gets his ski drawing bill going, I think it's going to be tough competition.
That would be a cool state sport. Does anybody have that one already?
It's a good
ski
question.
drawing, probably Wyoming, maybe feels like a Wyoming sport.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, it does.
So we've kind of gone off the rails here from a time standpoint, but we're skipping an interview this week. Aaron is our interview, and while he's already participated, while we have him here, we just want to go through a couple more things of, Aaron, how's America Outdoors? How's it treating
Do you want to
over there at
reintroduce me? Should I walk off? Should I walk off?
Just
screen real
walk
quick?
right off, walk right back in. Yeah, no, if you would, that'd be great. So, Aaron, how's America Outdoors treating you? What's been one of the big sort of things that you've discovered when you've moved up to the big leagues?
America Outdoors is great. When people have asked me how it's going, the sort of my go-to response has been, it's kind of like asking somebody in the middle of a boxing match how they're doing. It's like, ask me after the fight. It's full on, but I mean, this is like the commiseration club on this front. Like, it's a lot. I think it's been really invigorating, but also like eye-opening just how the breadth of even like facilitated recreation or like, authorized recreation nationwide, like just how big that tent is and how much it captures and how complex some of the structures are, like down to, and it from global local, like county fees on specific boat ramps, all the way up to NPS directives and executive orders. So, but it's cool. It's, I'm still getting to do stuff that I care about for people that are generally people that I really, really like and that are trying to do cool stuff with their lives. So altogether, Erik, good stuff.
Awesome. One of AO's big annual events is coming up here with Camp Washington. What do you guys have any priorities, big things you're going to be talking about? What's sort of the big movements that you guys are trying to make?
Yeah. So AO, kind of like IOGA. Not kind of, just like IOGA. America Outdoors does an annual fly into DC, members from across the country, and go talk with members and agency heads and stuff like that. So that's coming up March 3rd through 6th, here in just a couple weeks. Kind of a hodgepodge of different priorities we're talking about. One is definitely the ORG Act, the Outdoor Recreational Guiding Act, which proposes an amendment to the Fair Labor Standards Act to exempt certain recreation service providers from the requirements of Section 13A and B of the Fair Labor Standards Act, which is, short. Probably not the treatment I should give it for podcasts, right? Like, it's a big enough issue that it kind of requires going into, but in short form, it just tries to address the fact that the standard 9-to-5 model isn't very compatible with our industry, that it creates a lot of reporting entrapment traps for folks in the industry, including guides. So, like most folks, if you're an outfitter guide, you probably heard about this when we were working our way through 14026, the executive orders, things like that, when IOGA was all over this. But like, technically, if you're a guide, you wake up on a multi-day river trip, you have to say if you didn't sleep 8 hours, and that technically has to be reported to and signed off on daily hour logs, and all those things have to be reported and held on to for a certain period of years by your employer, et cetera, et cetera. And Congress has already recognized, like, if you look at other comparable industries, so like fishermen, right, or even movie theater employees. Like, there's 87 exemptions exactly like what we're talking about.
Summer
just
camps,
for industries
if I
that,
remember right.
Yeah, it goes on and on, but just for industries that this doesn't really make sense for. So that's a big one. That's been a priority for a long time. And a big part of it goes back to our conversation earlier about like the executive orders. This all ties into the fact that we just keep on getting caught as an industry in bouncing back and forth between these frankly political, like reciprocal tit for tat executive orders that just happen in this case to if not center on us, then definitely involve us as an industry. So that's not the kind of predictability or stability that anybody can work with. especially when labor is such a huge proportion of your costs. So we just need to get after that. That's a big one. Another huge area that we're focusing in on is the Explore Act, like generally, but what that more specifically. So the Explore Act, the single largest piece of legislation ever around permitting and administration, and arguably one of the biggest public lands bills ever, passed last year, January 4, 2025. And we were supposed to see some faster implementation on that, or some fairly immediate implementation. That certainly did not happen for a number of reasons. Just ask whatever you use, ChatGPT or Facebook or whatever, to like give you a year in review for what happened over the last year to refresh yourself on why things may have gotten derailed. But we're going to be talking about some of our implementation priorities as an industry, stuff that I'm sure that I know IOGA has been talking about, but that I know that Idaho outfitters are probably feeling and wondering about, because it's all really good, but it's all fairly confusing. And some of it is self-enacting, which means like, hey, this isn't statute, this is now true. And some of it requires rulemaking, which is exactly what it sounds like. And when it goes to rulemaking, we as an industry have a role in informing what that rule looks like. So according to the original intent, and America Outdoors was the organization that really started this whole parade going back 20 years. And so understanding what the original intent of some of these provisions in Title III of the Explore Act are is pretty important. And we've been asked to provide as much by both germane congressional committee staff as well as agency leadership. So also we'll be talking a lot about Explore, as well as some technical amendments to Explore that we think are pretty important to get in place to just clarify what some of the things that are in particular in Title III of the Act. That's a doozy. But we're also going to be talking to folks. We have a couple different public lands issues on the agenda, depending on who we're talking with. So we want to talk to both congressional members as well as agency leadership about the use of the Congressional Review Act as applied to resource management plans, and some of our very significant concerns about that. Have you talked about that on the pod yet? Are we calling it the pod?
I don't know. We've really talked about it. We definitely talked about it at the annual meeting. This was the issue that I believe at the annual meeting I said, this is either a non-issue or it's possibly the end of the world. It's not in the middle. It's one or the other.
Yeah. I think that's a fair way of framing it. And yeah, not to scare anyone, but for sure, it's either nothing or it is catastrophic, and not just for outfitters or like folks under a special use permit or special recreation permit, but for like oil and gas, for grazing. And we see that also in the comments submitted, or in the comments by those different types of organizations or those different stakeholder groups around the same action. I'm going to put a pin in that in case we want to go in, but because that's a doozy, that's a big one. But we're going to be talking about the Congressional Review Act. As soon as I said that, I just like, part of me inside just wanted to start talking about it. So maybe we'll go back. Also going to be talking about the rescission of the roadless rule. Obviously in Idaho, that is not operative, right? Because Idaho has its own roadless rule that insulates it from the rescission of the broader federal roadless rule. But this could have some really big impacts on outfitter operations in different parts of the country for those states, and not least in the East, where you have sort of these hodgepodges of different parcels of land and forests. There's not really too much that I think can be done about that at this point by industry or otherwise. The rule is being developed. The final rule will come out. I don't expect that, our conversations in DC will meaningfully influence the development or the language of that final rule, in particular because it's just calling for a rescission. But I think one thing that we'd like to talk to agency heads, and in particular Forest Service in this case, and congressionals about, is whether or not there might be an opportunity to adjust the rule to allow for something similar to what allowed for Idaho to develop its own roadless rule, to acknowledge that there are areas in the country that have more complex and different uses and designations, and that spending more time and being more granular in how we look at these types of uses is appropriate before a full-fledged, full-throated rescission. Then there are some issues going on down. We'd like to talk to, in particular, Forest Service again, but also members of Congress about both thanking them for what they've already done, but also asking for additional sort of top-down direction and encouragement to Forest Service regions and individual forests to make use of the National Forest Trail Stewardship Act, National Forest Service, National Forest System Trail Stewardship Act, and outfitter fee offset. We've seen a ton of huge accomplishments, in particular in Idaho and in parts of Montana, around use of fee offset and what we can accomplish through that kind of partnership with the Forest Service. And I also want to talk to folks at Department of Interior and Forest Service about whether or not this could be a model for some additional program that is maybe more flexible, not quite as confined in its language originally, or its sort of informing language, that allows outfitters to be better partners and better stewards along with agency, where agency has gaps or doesn't have the capacity to fulfill their mandate fully. So that's the top list of things. There's more.
I think that one's a great one, just conceptually, because one of the things I think the Trail Stewardship Act, I feel like I have seen in it, is we're regularly coming across these places that outfitters could step in and really help solve real problems. But that sort of original language in the Trail Stewardship Act, occasionally we've gotten some, I don't know if brave is the right word, but like can do folks at the agency who see problems and see a method to solve them and said, yeah, let's, the philosophy of this should allow us to do this.
Yep.
And going back and getting something that broadens that capability out to say, no, there's a broader spectrum of things that using this trail stewardship fee offset model, there are so many places that outfitters could step in to help maintain infrastructure and solve real problems on forests. That would be an awesome change to make it more the direction it's supposed to go versus kind of the willingness of a few creative people to say yes to things. Would be
Well,
awesome.
it's also the natural progression when you think about it, right? Like where this came from, folks are thinking like, hey, we have this enormous backlog, like across land management agencies of required, let alone of just general maintenance and improvement, right? And like, what if there were a way that we could, like, we don't have the capacity, and some of that is just access. Like, what if there were a way that we could take advantage of the people that we work with who have like authorization already to be operating these places to help us accomplish some of this work? Like, I'm paraphrasing, obviously, a long history, but someone in that conversation is like, oh, yeah, like, what if we just focused in on trails as a starting point? Because this is sort of the poster child of deferred maintenance, especially with Forest Service, right? So, like, what if we just focused in on trails? We could look at like backcountry land-based outfitters to be sort of our key partners here. Went forward with it, passed, went into place. There were certain pilots. Those pilots, in particular, here in Idaho, Nez Clear and the Salmon Chalice, just like took off. And we did have some like courageous and like innovative people within those forests that saw the value in this and saw that they could actually make an impact and tried to really make it work and did really make it work. But ultimately where it came from was trying to address this problem of like, we have limited capacity, we have limited access into a lot of these areas where we have a statutory requirement to perform certain maintenance and improvement. Like we need some sort of system to be able to make us more effective. So I think the hope, like where I want to go with this is like, yes, within Trail Stewardship Act and outfitter fee offset, like we want to continue to have flexibility within that program, but also like this is a great model for how even in particular cases, we can accomplish things we couldn't otherwise accomplish through like fairly straightforward partnership, just cutting through red tape, making that partnership easier, not having to go through grants and agreements and the formal contracting and bidding process with federal agencies, which is exhausting and frankly way more expensive for the taxpayer. Like for all those reasons, these are all things we should do and like actually solve some problems. So we'll see if that works. It should. We'll see if it works.
I'm excited to have the conversation. I'm excited to go participate in Camp Washington. It's been my first one, so looking forward to it. It'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, the Idaho delegation, but the Idaho delegation of outfitters is good.
Yeah,
They're just going to kick some butt this year.
Like every year.
I was thinking about establishing scorecards by state to say who I'm most proud of, but feel that could be
I definitely think we
divisive.
should do that. Good luck, Arizona.
Yeah. We'll also have Carrie Romero with New Mexico Council of Outfitters and Guides. She hasn't been before. Stoked to have Carrie there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it. It should be a great event, and we'll have some updates after that is over. I think we've kind of hit our time, and I know Aaron's got more work to do that could be done in a day, so I want to get him back to that. But I expect Aaron will be a regular contributor here in the future. So make sure you tune in for that. Or if you don't like that idea, keep it to yourself, I guess.
Keep it to
I don't
yourself if
know.
you don't like it. I think the heart of this pod really came from a recognition of the need to have me as a regular contributor, and it just kind of went off the rails right from the get go. So if I send in your comments, suggest we get back to the original intent. Also, we didn't talk too much about some other stuff within Explore, but for outfitters that are BLM permittees, it sounds like this might be in the IJ newsletter, but we'll be having sort of an all outfitters welcome nationwide webinar, town hall, whatever you want to call it, with the BLM, with the two folks who are most situated to answer your questions directly, February 25th. And I was just trying to find the time, but I can't find it. So Erik will have it in
I
the
believe it
show notes
was,
if that's
I'll
a
have to
thing.
double check, but I think it was 11 a.m. Mountain Time. And the link to it and the link to register will be in the newsletter coming out tomorrow or today if you're listening to this, whatever day Wednesday is, and however this thing works out. But I think the newsletter on Wednesday will have links to this. You can also find it on the America Outdoors website.
Yep.
So thanks, Aaron. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks all of you for joining us. And thanks to all the outfitters and guides in Idaho who are working hard out there, sharing our incredible state with people who would otherwise never have a chance to fall in love with it. If you liked this episode, subscribe, I guess. Tell your outfitter and guide friends. I guess you can leave reviews. And if you do, it's supposed to be important. If you're not a member of IOGA, please consider joining, and America Outdoors. You should really join them both. You should be members of all of us because we're working together at different levels to advocate for you and try and make this industry better. And it's support of our members that allows both organizations to continue advocating for this community. Thanks again.
Nobody
Have
else
a great
is doing
week.
it, guys.
Fact is, nobody
You
else
thought
is
you were
doing
getting
it.
out. You thought you were getting out. Nobody else is doing it for you. If you're not a member of IOGA, you're insane. They're the only person trying to support your business. They're literally the only
you're
person
here.
that
You're here
cares.
too at the higher level. So
Okay,
we got stair
AO is
stepping.
also.
America Outdoors
I
is
walk
also
that
here.
back. I walk that back. America Outdoors is also here supporting you. But you should be members. There's no excuse to not be a member.
Awesome. So this week, go out and join, become a member, and we'll see you back here next week.